I think now we are live. Yes, can anybody please go to YouTube and confirm we are live? Otherwise, it may not be recorded. Right, I'm assuming we are live. If we are not live, please let me know and I'll stop. Cool, so let's talk about the cloud. The original title of this workshop was AWS, but it's online. Cool, fantastic. Thank you, Gideon. I changed the topic slightly because of two reasons. First of all, if you want to play with AWS, you need to enter your credit card details. That will stop many people here from playing with it. That's the first thing. So that made me not that useful. The second reason is I thought it could be convenient to compare AWS with other cloud computing vendors. So I would like to talk about pros and cons based on my experience. Some of the vendors I'm going to list today are really well known. I have a lot of experience with some of them. With others, I don't have that much experience. Also, don't forget, this is a live discussion. If you go to Google and you search AWS versus Google versus, you will find many articles that will say something like update 2019, update 2020, because this changed. Yeah, so whatever is a disadvantage of AWS could be an advantage next year because they have added some changes. Yeah, so this is a live discussion. But today, on the 20th of December of 2019, I would like to share my thoughts. Some of these notes are objective, so some of these notes are crystal clear. Others are based on personal feelings. Yeah? It's a mix of both. All right, so the main reason why I would like to talk about that is if you apply to Sky and you join Sky, you are not going to have the problem of selecting a cloud provider because obviously they have a big infrastructure, they have many top DevOps developers, they know these things, right? But if you don't join Sky and you join a small startup, you may have the responsibility sooner or later to decide where your app is going to be deployed. That has happened with many former students. Yeah, we have the case of a guy that got some money and he wanted to create a startup and he contacted me like, hey, I have no idea about coding. I know you know about coding, so please send me a couple of students. And we did that, right? So for them, it was a big challenge because there was no CTO, nothing. So they had to deal with all the aspects of the startup. And they're both working there, and they got a salary update recently, so they are very happy. But it's true that on the first weeks, it was a big problem, right? Because they had to build an app about, financial things, right? And they had no idea. So for them, they had to deal with these things. So if that scenario happens to you, I think it's good to have at least a reference about what are the valid options and what are not the valid options. So I'm going to display a few alternatives, not necessarily following any order. Probably I will start from the simplest to the most comprehensive or complicated one, but not necessarily, right? So let's just talk about different options and then advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons. So the very first approach to deploy your app to the cloud is following FTP. That's the classic, that's the oldest one. FTP means you got a domain, for instance, for your portfolio, www.sexyboy.com, yeah? I'm sure that domain is taken and not for a portfolio, right? But anyway, you got your domain. So whenever you buy a domain, generally speaking, if you get a domain with like a big host provider like 1&1 or GoDaddy or things like that, they give you some basic FTP. FTP is like a very small hard drive in the cloud. So that means that you can build your application running, which command you need to build your app, guys? npm run build, right? When you run the command, you get a list of files, so you can upload them to the cloud. Yeah, so that's the classic. My portfolio, that I haven't touched like in 5-6 years, is still using that technique. Yeah, I wouldn't ever do that anymore. But historically speaking, that's the way it's been working, right? So let's see what's the best way of presenting the information here. So vendor, pros and cons. Maybe. So FTP, pros, simple, right? It's, uploading files. Cons, not very professional. Or if you want to be more precise, hard to automate. Why? Because you have to copy your files manually to GoDaddy, go to GoDaddy.com, you know. I know some services, they have some sort of CLI, some command line interface that can simplify a bit, but still, to me in 2019, feels a bit old-fashioned, yeah? But it's still there. So if you need to do something very simple, that may work. Also, it goes without saying, there is no backend. Right? This is only for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's the first one. Then, after FTP, we got things like GitHub pages. Yeah? Actually, historically speaking, we've been using in all the previous cohort GitHub pages. This is the first cohort we don't use it. So GitHub pages, the idea is fantastic. The idea is, wait a minute, where do you upload your code? Do you upload your code to a porn site? No, you upload your code to GitHub. So if my code is already on GitHub, why can't we automatically make that code available on HTTP, right? So that's the whole point behind GitHub pages. So pros is like, it's a natural approach to me. It's just, you know, something absolutely natural, yeah? But the cons is, even though the idea is fantastic, we've had many issues. According to GitHub, is okay, you do 3 steps, ABC, you can do that in 20 minutes to set up your project to be compatible with GitHub pages, and then push. After you push, your changes are live. 40% of the time, it fails. Why? And it's not that it fails, you never get any error. Because, okay, if it fails, but you give me an error, I can debug the problem, whatever. But no. So GitHub says, yes, deployment successful. But then you go to your portfolio, and your changes are not there. So it's hard to work with, right? Hard to work with. Because it fails randomly, and you don't get any feedback. So something as simple as deploying your app to the cloud, once again, this is only for front-end, so no back-end. That's another issue. But I mean, I can respect the second issue. To me, that's not an issue at all. That's because of the limitations of GitHub. Fantastic. But the first one, that's a blocker to me. If I deploy HTML to the cloud, it should work, right? Why it fails sometimes? No, that's a no-go. And because of that, now we introduce something new, right? Which is the SAID, or now, right? This is what you've been working with. Actually, probably you have more experience than me working with that tool. But based on the feedback I receive, and correct me if I'm wrong, so pros, it's quite simple to set up, right? And to work with. And also, it's reliable. You deploy and it works. That's the main difference with GitHub pages, right? And cons. Well, not sure if that's a con, but only serverless backend supported. What that means? That's a relative con, because that means that that's also a pro. You have some sort of backend support, sort of. So what can you do with now? What you can do is, you can create, for instance, a basic endpoint. You know, in conflicts you are doing REST shows, yeah? So you can deal with things like that, but you cannot write any JavaScript on the backend. Yeah? So you cannot create a node server and then adding if, else, return, import. You cannot do these things. You can, however, create, for instance, a JSON file with a list of TV shows, and then you can tell now, hey, whenever the user goes to /rest/shows, then return this JSON file. Yeah? So it's sort of a simplistic approach to backend, very limited. You can still perform some tricks like queries, so you can filter data by ID, by title. So you can do some small tricks, but it's not definitely something suitable if you want to build something complex. If you want to, for instance, some of you are integrated with external APIs, right, in your team apps. That's not good enough, yeah? But hey, if you just have a simple app with only front end and maybe for instance, Codeflix will be to me in the limit, yeah, because Codeflix you have some backend, but still the backend is just a list of data that you want to return. It may work, yeah. Also for testing purposes, I think it's really good because you can definitely play with front and backend integration. So yeah, once again, I think that's a very new thing. So we'll see how it evolves next year, but something to consider definitely. All right, and now let's talk about Heroku. So that's one of the oldest systems. I've been using it since 2013 until 2018. I stopped using it commercially last year. So the pros. So with Heroku, things start getting serious, right? So actually, we could even create like two groups. The first three are mostly front-end oriented. The next ones are full stack oriented. So these ones are powerful already. So Heroku, pros. To me, the best thing about Heroku, two things. Simple and docs. So many developers start dealing with Heroku as their first vendor, as their first cloud experience. Works really well because the docs are fantastic. Yeah? So if you don't know what the cloud is, you have no idea, I think this is what you pay for, right? Also, they have a free plan. I didn't even mention that on the first free because it goes without saying these ones are free or they have a free plan. On the next ones, it's not going to be that common to have a free plan. But Heroku, they do have a free plan. Yeah, so that's a pro. So, cons. First of all, pricing. Even though Heroku has a free plan, that free plan is very limited. You know that with Heroku, if you stop using your app for more than 30 minutes, I believe, the app goes into sleep mode. Sleep mode means next time you try to access your app, it won't respond for a couple of minutes. So it will take a long time to load, right? To render. So that's not valid for production. Yeah? You don't want to have customers waiting 2 minutes until your app renders. Yeah? So that means that at some point, you will like to pay for Heroku. And even though at the very beginning, pricing is very affordable, starting at $7 a month, unless they've changed that recently, that's good. So I'm not against that. I think it's good pricing. So with paying $7 a month, your app never sleeps. So yeah, if your app starts growing and making some traction, the pricing will go up and up and up and up and up and up. So at some point, it's not feasible to have a big application hosted by Heroku unless you pay a lot of money. Yeah? They give you the sweetie, so it's very good to start with, but at some point you will probably start thinking about migrating somewhere else. Does that mean that for me Heroku is a no-go? No. For me Heroku is a fantastic tool to start with. It has a great balance of power and simplicity. Just bear in mind that one day in your life you will probably stop using it. But hey, let's keep it agile, right? If you're working on a startup and they need to release something quickly to the cloud, you pay $7 a month and at least you got something. Yeah? I stopped, so the first versions of Codeiry were hosted by Heroku. So the entire 2018, since 2017 to end of 2018, everything was hosted on Heroku. The main reason why we migrated from Heroku to AWS, as I'll talk about in a minute, is not because of the pricing necessarily, because I think I was paying like $50 a month, so that's something relatively affordable. It was because in one of the challenges we were running here, looks like you pay $7 a month, you get some sort of hardware, right? Pretty limited, 1 gig of memory, some CPU, you get some hardware, right? And it turned out that in one of the challenges we ran, we were like 25 people running the challenge. And according to Heroku metrics, we ran out of memory. We were consuming, I think we have like 512 megs of memory with that plan. And then at some point, during a couple of minutes, because everyone was submitting the questions, we were consuming 600 megs. So what do you think happened in Heroku when that scenario happened, right? Do you think that the service ran slower? No. Do you think that you got charged a bit more, like $7.50 a month? No. They shut down everything. To me, that was unacceptable. Yeah? Okay, you pay for a plan. But if you are consuming more resources either slow down everything or charge me a bit more. It was maybe a couple of minutes. Out of a month, a couple of minutes, I was going beyond the scope of my plan. And they shut down the service. Of course, I had no idea what was going on until I checked the logs the day after. So no one could complete the challenge. To me, that was enough to move away from Heroku forever. Yeah? But still, I don't regret, because thanks to Heroku, I managed to deploy Heroku to the cloud, to deploy Codiri to the cloud quite easily. Yeah? So just bear that in mind. So now, what else? We obviously have Google, which is Google Cloud Platform, GCP, PROS. I think to me they had the best UI. I'm not sure how to let me explain that. So whenever you sign up on one of these platforms, you get access to a dashboard where they tell you how to deal with stuff, right? So to me, ignoring Heroku, because Heroku is quite good as well, GCP is super complex, but the UX is fantastic. So you can learn very quickly. Yeah? Given it's very complex, you learn very quickly. And you got even things like you can do remote SSH online. So you know the terminal when you type commands. So with GCP, you can type commands on the cloud directly. So the UX is really good. Yeah, it's really, really, really good. You feel like you really enjoy dealing with it. Cons, two things. First of all, stupidly expensive. So we'll be using GCP at Codiri for about 25 days. On average, with AWS, I'll talk about it in a minute, we get charged like $100 a month at the moment. 25 days of testing, not even everybody was testing, only boot campers. So I sent boot campers a link to GCP, but people from other locations, other countries, they were not using GCP, they were still using the other provider. Yeah? Probably so half of the traffic was redirected to GCP, just to give the number simple. So I got a bill of $600. 6 times more expensive. 25 days. And I was not sure if promised, I may be a bit bold, but based on my understanding, the message they sent me is, you create a free plan, we are not going to charge you. If we charge you, we'll let you know once we start charging you. Yeah. So this is a common scenario with cloud providers. You get like a free tier plan, and once you go beyond that free tier plan, they start charging you. So I didn't get any notification from Google. I just get the bill, $600 out, never again. Yeah, they're having big problems. Actually, not sure if you've heard that, but GCP was on the news this week because someone filtered that obviously GCP is struggling to make business. I don't know why, right? They say that if by 2023 they don't manage to catch up or to be more popular than AWS, which is not going to happen, or Microsoft Azure, they will shut down completely. They will abandon that line of business. Yeah. So that's another reason not to trust them. You are going to invest a lot of time, energies, and money on the cloud. Yeah. You don't want to trust someone who is likely to shut down the business in 3 years. Yeah. No go. So then we got Azure. I'm not very opinionated about Azure. I think, based on my very little experience of few hours, the process, I think is well accepted by the community. So even though I'm not an expert on Azure, if you go to Google, you will quickly see that people who is an expert on Azure, they have a good feeling about it. Yeah, that's the only thing I can tell you about it. I can tell you a bit about the cons. The cons is not as cheap as it should be, or as you may expect. It's clearly cheaper than GDP, at least, yeah? And also, it has a horrible UI, yeah? Once you go to the dashboard, it's very hard to understand what's going on, right? Lots of 90s icons. These icons that I'm telling you every single week to get rid of in your portfolio, they're still using them. Like, come on, why do you do that? Yeah? But anyway, this is something that I'm not super experienced, and definitely something that's worth to inspect. So now, well, there is something in between, Alibaba, AliExpress, all these things. So now they have their own cloud. What we got here, I have no idea. I never use it. But it's the Chinese, yeah. So obviously the Chinese are trying to get slice of the cake, yeah. So I have no idea about the service. I heard that they wanted to open a data center here in London. So it's something definitely worth to keep an eye and see how it evolves. I'll leave it there. And finally, AWS. AWS has been clearly my main source of issues in 2019, but I'm still using it. So let's first talk about the cons. So the cons is horrible UI. It doesn't help, but that's not the main issue. To me, the main issue is horrible docs. I mean, unless you are a DevOps person, you need to check the docs all the time, how you deploy, how you roll back, how do you, right? You trust the docs. Docs are horrible. And it's not that the docs are horrible. It's about horrible community support. You will often get problems with AWS, and they have official forums if you have a problem, because you pay for that, right? So they have forums where if something doesn't work or you get an error code, you post the error code, and they are supposed to support you, right? They never help. That's just stupid, right? The thing is, I got a problem, error code, whatever. All right, go to Google. Official forums, error, that error. Okay, yeah. How do we deal with that? Hey, AWS people, I got that problem. Can you help me? Next message. Hey, I got that problem as well. Hey, I got that problem as well. There are 3 million developers with the same problem, and they are unable to help out. Yeah. In base case scenario, they send, please send me a private message with your ID. Fuck off. What is a private message? 3 million people with the same problem. Answer it publicly. Yeah. And the way these problems are resolved is after all these issues, someone by himself or herself found a way to solve it and drops a message, hey, I'm an individual, I'm not affiliated to AWS, but I think the problem can be solved by running this command, and then sometimes it works, right? But that's bullshit. That's not the way you want to deal with problems. So the learning curve is very steep, yeah? It's not an easy journey. It's not. However, AWS is by distance the most popular cloud provider worldwide. AWS is more popular than all the others combined. Probably because it was the first one. That helps. Yeah? Actually, Heroku runs on top of AWS. That's one of the reasons why it's so expensive. Because when you pay Heroku, you pay AWS, and on top of that, you pay a fee to Heroku. Yeah? So, if it's so horrible, why it's so popular? Well, a few reasons. First of all, it's affordable. That's very important. That's very important because you don't really control the cloud. You don't control whether you have 10 users or 1,000. 10,000. Yeah, you know the cloud, the way it works. So it's affordable and sort of predictable. So Codiri traffic is going up like, 15% month after month. Yeah? So I know every month I'm paying 15% more. All right. Yeah? I don't know why I started to pay $50 a month. I don't know where that number is coming from because there's a matrix with payment, bill details and everything. But what I know is that this is predictable. So if I pay 50, I know next month I pay 55 and next month I pay 60. It's predictable and that helps me a lot. Yeah, that's very important. And so let's say AWS. Let me think if I'm missing something. By the way, AWS, when we talk about the cloud, in reality, there is a huge amount of tools. Yeah, so let me mention some of them. Now, particularly talking about AWS. So in other words, I believe in the long term, personally, AWS is the way to go, yeah, in the long term. Because even though it's very hard to have a nice setup, actually, I think I started to play with AWS in November 2018, and I think last week, I finally solved all the problems. So it took me about a year of pain, weekly pain. Yeah? It is true that on the first weeks, the pain was massive. The pain was, hey, the platform is down, 502 error. You don't know why. You don't know why. No feedback, nothing. Yeah. So it took me. I remember the first time it took me like 1 week. So the platform was down for a whole week. It was horrible. Yeah. So now the type of problems we have are less and less controversial or blocking. The last one was 1 out of 4 times I deployed the app to the cloud, it failed, so I had to deploy again. All right. I think I found why. Anyway, AWS, big. I think actually I'll tell you something. In a parallel reality, I could make a lot of money doing bootcamps with AWS, because I'll tell you something. React, all right, you're here learning React, but you can learn React in many different ways. There's a lot of documentation community. But how do you learn AWS? You cannot learn AWS that easily. The only way of learning AWS is just fighting with it during months. Yeah? So I think that information is very valuable. But anyway, that's a different story, right? So let me show you a bit of the interface of AWS. Once again, I didn't mention that, but AWS, I think it's the same with all the others, right? Apart from Heroku, all these highlighted ones, I don't think they have any free plan. Or in other words, they have a free tier, but when you sign up, you need to enter your credit card details. So expect to be billed, expect to get to be charged, to get some payments. Yeah, I think this is important to note. So, is there any question before I show you a bit of AWS? No? All right. So, by the way, I think I'm going to.
How much is for basic package?
On AWS, that's a good question. I think the good thing about the AWS is when you sign up, you get a big discount on the first year, which is good. Because on the first year, I don't know, you may be paying like $35 a month, something like that. Yeah, so it's good. It's quite affordable. Yeah, because still at Codery, we are using that plan, and we're getting some good number of customers. Yeah, so you don't really need to pay a lot more when you start growing. Yeah, so with that plan. This is the base package. Of course, you pay on top of that depending on what you have. I have multiple services on AWS. That's why I'm paying about $110. I think that was last month's bill. Yeah? Because that depends on the traffic. But anyway, this is more affordable than any other alternative. So it's definitely a good way to go. I'm going to stop streaming now because by accident, I may show some private keys and I don't want that to be on YouTube, obviously. So yeah, unfortunately I'm going to stop streaming now.